NASA at the Kennedy Space Center. Our goal is to research different technologies associated with being able to grow supplemental nutrition in the form of plants for astronauts to support their diets on long-duration space flights, to keep them healthy and in optimal performance. This room is kind of like our maker space, and we will do some very early concept development here of different things from a hardware perspective that'll facilitate plants growing in space. And we also look at some of the types of plants here early on before we maybe bring them to the chamber room. I think you guys came from the chamber room? Okay. So this is kind of a precursor room. I also use it as the place where we strategize the big picture of what does it mean to have food production in space, and when do we implement that as part of the roadmap to exploration. So this drawing here kind of shows the big picture, and that's what I'm really going to spend most of the time talking to you about. The three big areas on the bottom with these symbols, they're kind of just meant to represent surface habitats. So we have analog places on the ground. You probably know we have like surface habitats out in New Mexico. We have them all over. We actually work with the Russians. I just came back from one outside of Moscow in Antarctica. So there's a lot of places here we can do research into isolation and confinement, and we try to put plants as part of that, because one aspect that's kind of a total aside from what you can get food and nutrition wise is the behavioral benefits of just having something from Earth nearby, seeing something that's green and not sterile. And so the crews like to have plants around. They either really enjoy them, they could care less. It all depends on what their background is. We knew somebody who grew up on a farm. He said he never wanted to take care of a plant again. Interesting too is that it's not just, in that context, it's not just plants for food. In the analog in Russia, they actually have a food place that they're growing plants for food, but in their living quarters, they have a little habitat very analogous to that black one over there that you can buy commercially. And they were told they could put whatever, they could grow whatever they wanted in those habitats, whether it was ornamental plants, flowering plants, or food plants, and they all voted to put flowers in there. So, yeah, so plants have a role regardless of food, but our primary responsibility here is how do we integrate them for food. So, again, I had surface habitats on the ground here on Earth. I have them on the moon, also have it on Mars. I have some challenges associated that are different, though. If you look with the little nomenclature here, on the Earth, I'm in a 1G environment, typical of everything we've ever done, and I'm under the protective radiation magnetic fields of the Earth that basically protect us from deep space radiation. But when I go to the moon, now I'm in a partial gravity environment, 1/6 gravity. What does that do to how water and air behaves in the root zone for plants and how they have access to it? I'm also no longer in that protective radiation environment from Earth. I'm in the deep space radiation environment. And we have not spent enough time there. We haven't taken plants there to know how are they going to perform when exposed to that for long periods of time. And it's not just the plants that are growing, it's the seeds we would bring along the way. I might have seeds stored up there for a few years. Are they going to germinate? Are they going to grow successfully? Same thing for the surface of Mars. Top three are our microgravity actual space-based missions. International Space Station, which has been up there for 20 years doing its thing. What I get there that I don't have on Earth is I have the microgravity evaluation, but I'm still in the magnetic field protection of Earth. It's when I get to the new idea, the new station, I don't want to call it a station, that's not politically correct. The next vehicle, the Gateway, now that's where we're deploying this thing out by the moon, but now I'm in both the microgravity and the deep space radiation environment, which is the same as when I go on the missions to Mars with the deep space transport vehicle. So these are all the destinations that we're working in, and the question is, where does food come into this that we have to grow, as opposed to the prepackaged food, which is always for the anywhere near the near future is going to be a big component of the diet. What we're looking to do is to supplement that nutrition. And the reason is, right now the prepackaged food lasts for on the order of about 3 years before certain key nutrients, vitamin C, vitamin B1, K, potassium, I start not being able to get those in the quantities needed by the crew. So think of a crew being gone for 3+ years on a mission to Mars, and now towards the latter part of that mission, the food they eat isn't giving them the nutrition they need. So to make sure that they're going to be healthy and that they be able to operate at peak performance, we need to supplement that prepackaged diet. And that's really our mantra, is to help facilitate a fully functional and healthy food system, prepackaged food and the food that we grow. So where's the first place I'll need to demonstrate a reliable, operable system? We had been going and saying, well, that's going to be on the deep space transport mission. In the space near the moon, I still have relatively easy access to get there, relatively, it's, instead of a couple of days to get to ISS, I've got maybe a week to get to the gateway, depending if it's a logistics flight. Orbital mechanics says it may take me 6 months to get there. It's very interesting just because of the nature of the orbits and the energy of our vehicles. Unless it's a crewed mission, logistics flights take longer to get there. But I definitely need to have something when I go onto the deep space transport mission. So that had been our model on working microgravity issues, trying to help me develop select crops, develop the hardware, so that I have something ready when we to get this mission to Mars. Now, what's happened within the agency in the past 6 months to a year is kind of a recasting of the vision, and that vision says, hey, we're going to go back to the moon first, all right, before I go to Mars. And so that's actually pushing out this microgravity need case probably another 10 years or so. We need to continue working it, but the need date is going to be further out. But what that does is it moves now partial gravity case sooner. Part of the reason is going to be anything that we're going to take to Mars from a plant growth perspective, we're going to want to dry run on the moon. And that's the real benefit of the moon. I've seen a lot of people talk about, well, we don't need a gateway, we could just go from here to there. And a lot of risk with that. As soon as when I make the commitment to go to Mars, there's no coming back at that point for a period of time. The planetary alignment is such that once I'm going, I'm gone. My ability to go and send something there if needed is always going to be a delay, because we're going to go when the planetary alignment is optimal. After that point, orbits get further away. There's points in time where when our orbits are at the extreme opposite in distance, there's a 44-minute communication time between the Earth and Mars, and that's, compared to seconds, in low Earth orbit, virtually instantaneous. So that means a whole redesign in how we develop hardware for any vehicle. We're no longer looking at vehicles that we can supply replacement parts to. These vehicles have to be completely independent wherever possible. It's no longer going to be astronauts responding to crew direction to fix things. The crew is going to have to fix it, and they're going to be telling the ground stations, hey, this is what we had go wrong, and this is what we did to fix it. So all the hardware we devise has to be really, it's a whole new paradigm in hardware development and operation, reliability, sustainability. And our plant growth systems are going to be part of that. So that's why even here now we're looking at technologies that really focus on automation, reliability, not using much in the way of consumables, making sure everything is reusable. And that's not really been the path that we have been on as we've been just conducting basic research. The hardware that we send up now for veggie and advanced plant habitat, we send up packages of basically, it's arsenite, it's kind of like the substrate, it's kind of analogous to the dirt you would use. And you grow your seeds in that, you basically grow the plants you want to grow, and then you're done, you throw them out and you discard them. So it's a one and done, you're shipping up this weight that has one purpose and then it's discarded. When I start talking about going further and further from Earth, that weight has an even more significant penalty because everything costs more and takes more energy to get it further away. So we're looking at moving away from non-reusable sources of substrate. We're looking at trying to say, hey, can I reuse something, or do I even need a substrate? What can we do to make things completely autonomous? Ultimately, when I get to the surface of Mars, we're looking at bioregenerative life support systems. We're looking at cases where I'm growing plants that are producing oxygen, they're consuming CO2, and now I'm starting up a whole ecosystem. That's way down the road, but we're at least looking at some of those concepts now as to how do I grow my plants reusably, reliably, with the hardware that I'm bringing along. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but I think this gives you a kind of the flow for where we're going in space, the moon being back involved now. I don't know if anybody's got any questions at this point, because like I said, I keep talking.
Please do.
Yeah.
Was it a surprise to suddenly have like the moon thrown back into the mix, and then now having to focus on that?
If you're asking me personally, I would say no. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to go to Mars, so I mean that's the place I'd like to be. But realistically, when you're given the different scenarios as to what makes sense and what's more practical and where would you learn to do things, it makes a lot more sense to me to go to the moon first. They've even talked about, and I just heard a presentation of this a couple of weeks ago, if you got a three-year mission to go to Mars, you just go and do it for 3 years. Or you launch astronauts from the Earth, you let them sit 6 months on the ISS. That's kind of like your transit flight. You move them over to the Gateway when it's built. They spend maybe 20, 30 days there. Then they come down to the surface of the moon, simulating the amount of time that they would be on the surface of Mars. So they're transitioning from a 1G environment to months in microgravity to now down to a partial gravity environment. They're doing their things, they're seeing how can they operate hardware in that environment after those periods of time. Then they come back up and they do the same thing in reverse, and they've done a 3-year mission. Now they've done it in isolation and confinement. They're actually talking about the potential of, while on the ISS, segmenting off one of the modules so they don't have all that space to work and they have a similar volume that would be on the transport vehicle. Because psychologically, that's a big factor too in a mission like that. You know, it's not just can the hardware do it, and I think that's where, boy, here I go. I shouldn't do this one time.
Do it.
I have a follow-up. We're the group for it. Do it.
All right, so when I think of Musk's version, so I'm embedded in NASA, and I try not to be biased with the culture of NASA, but I see him come up with the BFR concept, and he's going to go and send these people to Mars, and I sit there and go, okay, how are they going to feed on food? How are they going to feed them on the mission? When they get there, how are they going to feed them, and what are they going to do? And I went to a couple of conferences last year where he was at it, and people asked him, "Are you kidding me right away? Oh. These people want to stay."
No, he's just getting good.
All right. Well, the bottom line was, keep in mind that when you hear about SpaceX, it's a transportation company. Their goal is to get you from point A to point B.
Right.
How you survive on that journey, they don't do research, and that's what we do. What you're going to do when you get there, that's part of the exploration mission. That's not what they do. They will try to get you from point A to point B, but the rest of it really falls on NASA and international collaborations to kind of figure out.
If we're giant nerds about this, where can we learn more, or like talk to people like you, or find out more about this
Talk
stuff?
to me.
They're dragging us away.
Yeah. Go to the NASA website. I think you can probably find something about exploration. Search on exploration.
Okay.
I did look on YouTube for things about the Gateway, and I was really not very happy with armchair people talking about the Gateway. They didn't really know what they were doing. And then I guess go through PAO, Public Affairs, and have them reach out to us, and we should be able to figure out how to do that.
Yes.
Personally, me, I have no problem with that. Some people are so busy they don't have time for it.
Cool.
Just on Facebook. I have a Twitter account, but I never use it. I'm too
You
old for
should. We want to hear from you.
it. I don't know. Let me see if I have any on me.
We'll all share it. If
I was gonna say, yeah, you could just take a picture.